Hey, Benny, good evening.
Hey Reed, good morning for you. Yeah.
Thank you. How you doing this week?
Good, good. I am looking forward to the rest of the week. I'm having loads of fun, and I'm always interested to see what else the week is going to bring.
Exactly. Right after I'd say Monday is usually my catch-up day. Tuesday when I finally start feeling like I'm getting into the groove of actually like now I can appreciate what's happening this week, not making up for what I
Yeah,
missed off on last week, for sure. But thanks for coming
yes,
on today.
absolutely.
Yeah, the
Well, thank you for
go ahead.
having me.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
yeah, no, just thank you for having me. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we've certainly known and talked to each other for quite a while now on our fun little Slack channel that we've been a part of. But
Yeah,
uh, it,
yeah,
it's I think an opportune time to get you on because you've also had a really interesting career transition recently, which I'm sure you'll get into, where you've gone from MVP for the
yep.
last how many years have you had an MVP now? 4 or 5?
2.5 years.
Okay, two
No,
and a half
well,
years.
no,
Yeah.
yeah. March 2020, the beginning of my MVP career, the end of the world. Yeah, that was essentially it.
Yeah, and as we're exiting COVID, you exited the MVP path in a sense and have now
Correct.
entered into Microsoft, which I think has been pretty cool. For people
Yeah,
tuning
yeah.
in, Benny's over from Europe and in Be Belgium, right? Yeah,
Yeah, correct.
yeah,
A
yeah,
bit north of Antwerp.
yeah. Do you want to give a little background about yourself, kind of where you came from and that
Yeah,
big career move that just happened for you?
absolutely. So, Benni De Jagere, I give people that want to do a valiant effort to pronounce my last name. I always applaud it. But as Reed mentioned, I come from Belgium, which means it's that teeny tiny country in the middle of Western Europe that is most known for chocolate,
Beer.
beer, lace, and non-functioning governments. Let's put it like this. I'm not above saying that. But yeah, I had a prior career as a consultant for about a bit more than 10 years. I did BI stuff. I did all things BI, Microsoft, and in the last years it was Power BI, enterprise architecture, the administration and governance, those kinds of things. And then yeah, um, December 1st, I got summoned into the mothership. I became a blue badge and lost the MVP status, but gained so much more.
Yeah, exactly. And you're one of how many are in the cat team now?
I think we are above 20. Let's say that. I can't give the exact number because it changes frequently. Uh, the one number that I can say is that it is the European team. The European squad
Mm-hmm.
is 5 people at this point, and we're doing things, we're growing, and we're having fun while doing so.
It's Chris Webb is the
Yeah.
program manager of all of them, and then you and probably should know more of the count. I just know the MVPs. I always forget where they're located, or the cats, but where they're located. Who are the other three then? Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Rui is in Portugal, and then Lars is in Denmark, and
Yep.
then for the time being, we still have Michael Kowalski in our. No, sorry, we got Phil
Uh,
in our team, but Phil
okay.
is going to transition into another team.
Okay.
But yeah, that's internal stuff, and then we've got new people coming on board as well in the coming weeks.
And I think it's like Microsoft's all in general just been absorbing and bringing on like a lot of really skilled people into the cat team, and I think really growing that division for sure. Like I mean, Rui just another Power BI MVP for people who aren't familiar with him, and he
Yeah,
joined in October. You said,
yeah,
yeah,
October. Yeah, correct.
exactly. So yeah, Microsoft's up in its game for sure.
Yeah, up until May, it was the European team was Chris. Period.
One person, yeah.
Yeah, that was the team. And then yeah, Lars came on board, Ruby came on board, I came on board, and then there's more people incoming. Yeah, but
Yeah.
essentially it is Europe slash rest of world. That's the thing I have to mention as well. So we
Yep.
cover the globe except US and Canada.
That team is managed by Adam Saxton. Yeah. Okay.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
Adam manages that team, and I specifically focus on the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. That's my territory.
Awesome. Yeah. I know there's a decent like tech boom, it seems like happening in Luxembourg a little bit. Amazon put their, European headquarters there and
Yeah.
everything else. So,
Hmm.
well, that's awesome. I like, congrats for you, by the way. On the transition,
Thank you.
it sounds like
Thank you.
it's been interesting for you as you've transitioned more from like hands-on stuff to customer-facing interactions. But it's been a lot of growth in terms of learning and refining existing skills that you've had in that kind of new
Hmm.
career path.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and today, like, I like the title that you have. I can actually just like flip over and just so I can talk to the. It reminds me a lot of the
Yeah.
way I design stuff, like visualization magic in the age of never seen science is like a PowerPoint that I have. But secrets and mysteries, it's those words that
Mhm.
like yeah, you could just say, you know, um, discussing features in your Power BI tenant, but that's not it's not nearly as
Yes.
captivating. So words like
Yeah.
secrets, mysteries, things that add a bit of like Novelia terminology into it just to make it seem more
Yeah.
engaging. I appreciate those when I see those. So well done on the captivating title.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you want to give a kind of like a summary of some of the stuff we'll be going excuse me going over today?
Yeah, absolutely. So this dates back to the day when I was still doing consulting, and when I got asked questions, do you know what is happening in the tenant? What is going on? Because, well, I mean, we've got the activity log, which means that we're capturing user activities that has been done, but essentially that time that is logged, there's a report designed on that somewhere, but we're not actually using that, and yeah, it's hard to pinpoint what exactly is happening from our self-service users because it is the self-service part that they were specifically talking about. And then this entire process boiled down to me getting a number of days, 5 days, to go nuts. They essentially said, we want to have something that can help us get those answers better. And that the process, the result of what I've built in those 5 days, quick and dirty, I'll admit it, is what we're discussing right now. And yeah, I had lots of fun building this because I love those kind of investigations on finding out things, trying to use those APIs and see what can they do. I mean, what can I get out of it, and how can they help me get to the answers I need? That's essentially the story we're going into today.
That is one thing that I will appreciate. Like when you work for an organization that has you customer facing and needs you to either get familiar with a set of tools or build a tool to help better understand those. It's nice to be given the time to do that. Like there's so many
Yeah,
things in Power BI that I would love just to have a week where I could just go offline and dive into it. But that's also very hard to do from a consulting perspective. So it's got to be cool. Just like, all right,
yeah.
this is my job for the next week, and it actually is what I need to be doing. And yeah, you just went ham and had were able to create some things out of it. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, this also came at a point, like I said, I was doing data architecture, admin governance, so I wasn't really building stuff that much anymore. I was always whiteboarding, I was always doing those sessions,
Hmm.
and they asked me, are you up to just going nuts on this? Just you get 5 days, do it, build it. And I took it with both hands. I had lots of fun doing so, and I learned many things, which is why this is one that I'll keep remembering for a long time. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and like, as you said, there's always little things where depending on the model and everything else, it might not be completely perfect, 3 months polished, but it works. And like from the some of the other like official Microsoft reports that I've downloaded off of app stores, like the Office 365 report, you can download most of those PBXs, and I've definitely peeled back the layers and some of like interesting. Curious why they did this with the model and use that measure to do this. It works, but it's there's definitely
Yep.
those times where like, all right, it's probably that they had a limited time and they could have spent another week cleaning this up, but it already works and it's it doesn't have to look perfect in the back end because it just has to function in the front end.
Yeah. The thing is as well is on the cat team, we've also got the visualization artists that you probably know, Chris
Yeah,
Hamill, Miguel Myers, and they are the ones that typically get some time to focus on building those things, build those things that go out to public in later phases as well. So there were improvements made on that front as well. But for the record, they were not included in this process, and you're going to see it in the report as well. It's not my best design work, but I wanted to deliver. period. That was my main goal.
I'm still like, just as a random question, when Miguel was on earlier this year, he mentioned that he was eventually going to do like release a new design site that was going to like have a whole lot of stuff on it. Do you know if he ever actually released that or?
I'm not sure. I think what Miguel released was the learn path for designing reports. Is that what you're referring to?
So it was a little separate. He actually was going to release his own like website, but it was going to be kind of like
Ah,
a catch-all location to learn a lot of different stuff and be a really good resource for things. But it was like kind of
yeah,
teased at the time.
yeah. No, I don't know if he's published it.
I absorb everything that he has just because like I like to consider myself someone who leans on aesthetics and design, but he has such a high goalpost when it also granted like the amount of time that I'm sure he spends on some of those report pages. It's a lot of time thinking about like just I spent a whole day thinking on this one page on just
Yeah.
how to make it visually pleasing, but it's really
Mhm.
impressive what he can do with like just a PowerPoint deck sometimes with the animations that he does, or just like nowadays
Yeah.
with the stuff in Power BI like like I can reproduce that, but man, like I'm envious that you were able to think of that. That is just like gorgeous.
He's an artist. Period.
Yeah,
That's pretty much
exactly.
everything I've got to say about it.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Do you want to get
shall we
started?
dig into this? Yep.
Absolutely. Let's
Sure
do it.
thing. All right. So first off, a little bit. I mentioned already that yes, Matthias, I've got you. I'm in the Power BI Cat team these days. I also, if I still have any free time left, I help run this user group called Data Mines. We do stuff in Belgium. If you want to reach out to me through any of the social channels, they're on there. But I think Reed, you've also got them included
Hmm.
into the live stream description, so people can
Down
definitely
below.
find me there. And then yeah, it's the ride or die statement. Say no to pie charts. I don't want to eliminate all pie charts, but I want to eliminate those that were made with that thought. Let's just put it this way. So what am I actually getting into right now is I want to make sure that we emphasize on the role of getting that audit log, getting that logging information. Getting that information out is one thing. The thing is, what the step that I don't always see taken after that is that we actually do something with that data, that we act on that data, that we get those insights, and that we communicate about these things. I mean, that's honestly back in the consulting days that I did, and what I've seen even now in the short time span that I'm in Power BI Cat. People log lots and lots of things, but then you need to do something with this. And then, as I mentioned, it's essentially me doing 5 days. This is to get you stimulated. This is to make sure that you have an idea of some of the things that you can do that go beyond that static report. That you can think about what can work for your specific organization and your specific task. And then make sure that you understand that everything I'm doing here is essentially just free if you can build this thing. So the thing is, what I mentioned as well is what sparked this entire thing. What started this question? I was working with a customer, and for yeah, I because I switched employers, I'm going to keep the customer name out of this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's I can probably mention it, but still, I'm just not going to do so. I was having a conversation with them, and as I mentioned, they were lacking a bit of an overview of what was happening. I mean, they had the activity log, but essentially I created a report for them and it wasn't used, that report. That can mean two things. The report was not designed well, which probably was true as well, but it was just a static log. It was essentially a few simple graphs, a few tables that just said these activities have happened. And that was it. And then they thought that they wanted to go further on this. And then the thing is that they were looking at the Power BI reports that they had inside of their tenant, and then going into looking in, well, what are actually the Power BI reports that are super popular? Yeah. So I forgot that the box comes up there. It says the most popular Power BI report anyway.
And I
And
can.
then it's essentially,
There we go.
yeah, no, it's okay. Leave it like this. Yeah. And then it's essentially just Joe from accounting updating an Excel file. It's potentially not the report that you thought was going to be the most used, because you also have those enterprise BI types of reports. And then that's what got this entire conversation rolling. So it is a customer, and they are a customer that are exceptionally well versed in the entire data culture conversation. I mean, in Belgium, I didn't spot that many customers that were actively pursuing that data culture situation. The thing is, if you're working around these data culture conversations, you also need some figures and some facts to back up those conversations, to spread that message, to say what we're doing is actually working because we have this and this and this, and that trend is going forward. And the customer is pretty much their textbook customer, because they came from a situation where they had the IT department that was the sole supplier of data. They made sure that all the data was there and that it could be used. They captured the data coming from different operations, different systems, and they put that into an operational data source. And that operational data source was usable for reporting purposes. The thing is that the majority of those reporting purposes were still, let's call them enterprise BI. It wasn't that much self-service BI happening. And in essence, it was SQL Server and views. That was the BI system. The thing is, they've always had data at the center of their decisions. They've got this statement, it sounds better in Dutch, but it's everyone is a data analyst, which means that everyone in the organization needs to have the data to back up their decisions. That's their vision. And like I said, not that many countries, not that many organizations in Belgium that I've worked with in the past had that. Well, they said they were doing the same thing, but they actually executed on this, and that's what made them different. And for the majority, they were DIY, do it yourself. They looked to consultants and to external partners as a second opinion, or hey, come build this proof of concept for us. Come do this experiment. Come show us how we need to do it, and then we will go ahead and do this. They are very self-reliant on what they want to be doing. And I engaged with them a few times. I mean, the first time I engaged with them was back when Power BI was initially released, and they wanted to look at the combination of analysis services, multidimensional, and Power BI, how they could use it. Let's just say that the result from that initial subject and that initial assignment was, yes, we can use it, but there are some kinks in the cable for working effectively with this. And then prior to 2018, they had operational reporting. That was, this is our HR data, this is our operational data, this is the data that we have, and it was all operational reporting, which means that they were essentially using lots of tables, matrices, those kinds of things. And based on that ODS layer that I've just described, it was the finance department creating a bunch of multidimensional cubes per subject. That was the reporting landscape. And then it was good old SharePoint BI, reporting services reports, Excel pivot tables. That was the landscape prior to 2018. And that worked for them. The thing is that Power BI came out and it got introduced into that organization, pretty much the textbook story. Some of the business users got a hold of it. They started building out reports. They were showing graphs, and they were, look how pretty this is, opposed to the SharePoint SSRS reports that we have. We want to use this one. This is way more pretty. And then they started working with Power BI. The same thing. They started using it. People were really enthusiastic about it, and they also had they're a fairly large company in Belgium, so they had an enterprise agreement with Microsoft, which gave them access to a number of licenses, etc. But that changed in 2019. I mean, that entire our enterprise agreement changed, and then they moved over to P1 because it made sense for them to go into the consumer story, where you had the read-only consumers and then the content creators. The thing is that they still wanted that external guidance on how do we govern and manage this tenant? How do we actually how do we actually make those decisions? How do we go ahead and start designing those workspaces, start putting up the permissions, etc. So helping them on that journey for admin and governance. And currently, last time I checked with them, there are about 80 content creators, which means that are people that are designing reports and publishing those reports as well, and about 900 content consumers, which means they're not small, but they're also not massive. It's somewhere
Hmm.
in between that magical SMB mark. There is it is large enough to have some critical mass, but it is also you can't go ahead and have conversations with all of those 80 people. You need to have some
Yep.
formal processes in place. And then Power BI is their strategic tool.
Oh,
It's been
you got
it's been
robotic for a second for some reason. All of us.
yeah, bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the headset sometimes. Power BI is their strategic tool for reporting needs, which means that
Is
if
there a
they
way to
do,
reconnect it possibly? It's still very robotic and like metallic-y for some reason.
I can shut it off and turn it on again if
We
that
might
helps.
we might want to, yeah, just because
Yeah,
it's very
I'll try that.
super robot-y. That's why I have that little lo-fi music playing in the background while we do the tech setup. I'll check my audio meter from this side once you get it reconnected. Yeah, Alexander, exactly. He upgraded to his final form. All right. And I would say it's not getting any audio from you, so you worst case, you might just refresh the vmix call, which will automatically log you back in, which would still be fun. Yeah. And he'll just be logging back in, guys, so give us just a minute. Let's see. Oh, I say something again?
Hello?
There we go. All right, we're back. Cool.
Or
Nice and
very
clear.
good. Very good. Yeah. Yeah, the headset does that sometimes. I'm not sure why.
I blame the Windows. Like similar with my headset is the that's why I use
Yeah.
wired. Is it switches between
Mhm.
audio versus mic, and but that's a whole other
Yeah.
conversation. But yeah, either way, we're good to go.
Yeah. All right. So Power BI is their strategic tool. That means that if they're doing any style of reporting, that is being done with Power BI primarily. The only exception to this entire story is there when we're talking about data analytics, data science experiments, like doing stuff in Python, those things, they can use their own tools. Or operational things that go into their operational cockpits, that is still done with other toolings, for instance. They heavily rely on real-time mapping, for instance, and that is done externally from Power BI. But all the things happening for getting insights, analytical purposes, that's all Power BI. So naturally, the solution they had with multidimensional, it had to migrate as well. So one of the assignments I did with them was migrate that entire landscape from multidimensional to tabular models, and that is also going on to go into Power BI premium data sets, and the entire SharePoint Online landscape migrated into Power BI artifacts. And when I'm saying artifacts, I mean workspaces, datasets, reports, dashboards, paginated reports. That's all the Power BI way of working right now. And
Hmm.
then for those pivot tables they still need, it's Excel Online because pivot tables you cannot get them to go away. That's the thing. Yeah. So about this should give you the view of what the customer is. But about this thing going into the secrets and mysteries, that's where it got really fun. Because like I mentioned, I got the freedom to start building this thing. And their ask was, okay, let's go ahead and design a cockpit. Because the thing is, when I said they were working in a data culture fashion, they're working with a center of excellence style, which means that they have a central team that does the overview and that does some of the admin and governance work for the entire corporation. And they have something that is called a data locket in Dutch, which means that they just have office hours where people can come ask questions, but they also meet with functional owners, with data stewards on a 2 weekly basis. The thing is, those conversations that they were having were about stuff like I can't get this tax measure to work well, or I need some guidance on how to build those reports, like those day-to-day stuff. But the other conversation that they needed to have was, hey, how are you building those reports? How are you actually doing something that works for the way that we want to be working in the organization? And that's where that conversation needed those facts and figures, because they needed to be able to say, hey, we've got this and this and this and this. These are our guidances. These are our best practices. And you're doing well or not so well, that word, not so well potentially on those guidances, on those best practices. So the entire thing of designing this cockpit was to facilitate conversations, was to help them make those conversations happen. Because ultimately they wanted it to lead to high quality work, so that it would adhere to the company standards they had, and that it would actually just help them get this done. And one of the key parts was that all those agreements that they were having, all those appointments, all those best practices, they had to be included in the in-house training, because every
Hmm.
person in that organization that designs content, that is a content creator, gets in-house training tailored to their own needs. So it's the general dashboard in a day plus some more advanced stuff, and then these are the specific things that we try to use in the organization. And then some general best practices that I'll dive into as well. That had to be introduced early on in that process, so that people knew from the get-go, okay, this is the way that we're expected to be working, and we're going to look at this periodically to see how we're doing. And then the key thing, I cannot stress this enough, is that the entire conversation, the entire story was designed to stimulate behavior, to make sure that people wanted to work that way, because it actually helps them get their work across in a better way. And it was not the belittling little finger and saying, thou shalt work in this way or thou shalt not work at all. It was the stimulation part that was really, really crucial in this entire part. That's also the reason why we spent like 15 to 20 minutes in a brainstorm on how are we actually going to call this thing. So to make sure that we had a term that wasn't loaded in a positive or a negative way. Because yeah, it was that kind of discussions that we had, which was also funny for a certain way.
Daryl had a question on logistics just during this project. Like how many
Yeah,
old cubes to Power BI data sets, and was there a reduction or an increase or a bit of both?
that is a really good question, Daryl. They went from about 20 multidimensional cubes to 15 tabular models. So it was a one-to-one migration, and it was decided that 5 of them weren't going to be migrated because they were barely used at all, and that
Yeah.
for those cubes, they were just going to create Power BI data sets, because Power BI was already being worked on at that specific point.
Hmm. Excellent.
Yeah, so a few cubes, but not saying it were hundreds of cubes. That's not the thing. No. All right. So who was the target audience for this entire story? As I mentioned, you've got the data team, and they had conversations with the data stewards. They had those conversations with the functional business owners, the subject matter experts, if you will, and then the data analytics team. They were the people that actually had to look at this thing and make those decisions. Okay, are the best practices, are the guidelines that we had in place, are they working or are they not working? That's what they were looking at with this entire thing. And then it started out with a good old-fashioned brainstorm. And the result of that brainstorm was that we were going to work on 5 topics, five, let's call it subject areas. And if you've been working with Power BI for a while, they're going to be incredibly recognizable. I mean, it's all about get data. How are you getting that data inside of Power Query? Are you doing the work, to quote Maxim's Roach, as far upstream as possible? That's the thing that we're looking at in the get data part. Transform data is how are you doing those transformations inside of Power Query as well. Modeling data, star schemas, preferably as much as those things, building your reports, and then when you've built the report, how are you actually going to publish them? Because that was a very important topic as well in this question. And then that conversation, that brainstorm led to a bunch of different things that we wanted to be doing. The thing is that when we did this, we actually flipped the quadrant, because it shouldn't be complexity of the monitoring. It should be the feasibility of the monitoring, so that the arrow is a bit, yeah, that flipped over. But that's semantics, and yeah, let's not do that. But that meant that the ones that were feasible and would have a high business value, those were the ones that we were going to focus on for this initial project. Because, like I said, it was 5 days. I wasn't going to be able to do all of them. But to give you an idea of what was the outcome from this, this is what we were actually talking about. And I mean, I'll quickly go over it. Is they wanted to have, and it's something that I back up completely as well, a local Power BI file for all of the reports that are checked in, which means no building reports directly in the service. That's the agreement they had. Go for reusability of data sets as much as possible, because if you don't have to load in data twice, that means that you can get better usage of the capacity, etc. Everything that's being shared in a production context has to connect to that ODS layer, preferably through an import or a live connection. And then every report should have an about section, which pretty much just means you have a help page or a page where you explain context. This report is designed because of this reason. This person created it. This is the business context. These and these and these are specific things you need to look into to make sure that you have them covered as well. Avoid calculated columns, avoid auto date time,
Yeah.
those types of things. I mean, the general things that we especially, I mean, Reed, it's a broken record by this point. We keep hammering on these things. And then, yeah, I mean, minimalize the data set so that it only use the fields, columns, measures, the
I
tables that are actually only used. Yeah,
I mean, like the funny part about this is just as a yeah 2 to 3 minute little tangent is I just started for a few hours to help a new client who had a similar thing. They had a
yeah,
4 GB after reduction. It was a 9 GB Power BI file, and then it went to the
yeah,
4, and then I got it down to 300 megabytes just
yeah,
by deleting the columns. But it is querying its data from 500 plus. One of them was 1.9 gigabyte Excel files where the data was dumped into. So like
and,
it took 30
and
minutes
were
for me
they?
to open the PBIX. I have an i9 with 10 cores, 64 gigs of
Yeah,
RAM, like and all that. My computer took half an hour to open it, and then deleting the columns was like another hour. But it goes to show you like they had long text fields, so they had like a text column with like 900 unique values that had like paragraphs in each row. So deleting that
yeah,
shaved off like 2 gigs, but it's a pretty common scenario. And I would say if you don't know data modeling, you don't really think to know where to look for perpetrators or know what the right tools to clean that up. But that's it's probably the first step that most consultants who do this stuff take is, all right,
yeah.
where are the rows and columns that need to go? And then you find that one perpetrator in the Vertipack Analyzer in DAX Studio. Mine, by the way, that one column is 98%, no, 78% of the whole file size was a single column.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those are as a consultant, those are great because that immediately shows
It's a nice win.
I've made an improvement. Yeah,
hmm
that's great. And yeah, that just gives you confidence with the customer as well. And
I
I
will say the
like those
refresh still
especially.
sucks. It took 2 hours to refresh it from those
Yeah,
Excel files, but the file's smaller, so they can publish it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I can imagine. Yeah. Um, if it's okay with you, Reed, I'd like to handle Matthias's question now because we've got
Yeah.
a breakpoint anyway. Yeah. So Matthias asked the question that seems like tabular models are old school because sources are all data cubes in the future. Correct? The thing is that
Yeah.
what you have to realize is that the decision to go to tabular models was in 2018. And at that point, they weren't, it was about making sure that they were able to get the data from those 20 cubes into a P1 capacity because they wanted to stay at a P1 capacity, period. So that's when they moved to tabular models, but they did know that the future was going to be Power BI data sets. They were aware of that, but they wanted to just to take a step in between this thing, and that's why they went with tabular models. But like I mentioned, one of the last things that I did with them in the November-October timeframe was migrating tabular models to Power BI premium data sets. So they are probably by now fully onboarded on Power BI premium
Oh,
with
and
all of those tabular models.
I do want to like to just to keep the context on those is like you're going from a traditional tabular model to a large data set size tabular model. It is still
Yes,
tabular models. Everything
yes,
that is in the Power BI
yeah,
service or in analysis services, those are all tabular. Because I see tabular models are old school. I'm wondering if the question is alluding to like tabular models are like an old method versus a newer, better type of data set. Everything is still tabular in the Vertipack engine.
The engine is the same thing. Under the
Yeah,
hood, it's
exactly.
the same technology. Yeah.
Yep. Good question, Matthias.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm not going to go over all of them right now. The thing is that not all of these are actually feasible. For instance, if I go into one of the few ones that I spent a lot of time trying to crack on was, yeah, how do you actually go ahead and check if people are using certified visuals only? How do you check for custom visuals? I mean, technically you could crack open every Power BI file, start scanning through this thing, and then report that back. But how feasible is that? And I've had discussions at that time on the Slack channel you mentioned with Craig Bryden as well. And he said, yeah, well, you're probably going to be able to do it, but how feasible is this? And the same thing for a template. I mean, just because they have the template file loaded into Power BI doesn't stop them from using different colors than the template file. So just because the template file is there and you could check the template file doesn't mean that it's necessarily so. And that's the types of questions that we had to think to is this actually feasible to start doing this? And this is the initial brainstorm. We did a second one later for vNext and phases after one, and there were more things added on this one. But I had to get building on this. I had to start doing something actually with it. And that's where we went into phases. And phase one was just those 5 days, get the data through PowerShell, set up the model, build a report. That was it. That was phase one. That was me going nuts on this. Then the next phase was look at scanner APIs, those lineage APIs that have been released a bit later as well, extend the model, extend the report, make sure that those are all included. That was passed on to someone else because I was no longer working as a consultant. Phase three was let's get the tabular edited best practice analyzer data, run that on top of the data sets that we've got loaded inside of Power BI Premium, and start getting out that data as well. Start doing that and do the same thing. Extend the model, build a report, etc. Because once you've got those best practice output files, the best practice analyzer output files, you get a ton of new information that you can actually go ahead and work on. And then thinking ahead about the future, and then is look into all of these new things that have been released. Look into capacity metrics app, because that shows us what is being used, how much CPU is it using, those types of things. Artifact access, so access to workspaces, reports, data sets, apps, dashboards, those kind of things. Who has access to what? Who has subscriptions to what? Are there reports that are being shared way too much with way too many people in the organization? Are there potentially even things in publish to web that shouldn't be there? And we were thinking about lots and lots of different things. The thing was, we had to land phase one first. So I went into building this thing, like I said, quick and dirty, and I started writing PowerShell because that is what I knew at the point, and that is what I went with. So the artifacts and all of the different things that are inside of the APIs were expected through PowerShell. And the most important one, the meat and potatoes, to say it like in a very American way, a very Texan way, let's say, is activity log. This is the core. This is the key to everything that I'm doing. And most of the things that I'm reporting on is coming from the activity log. That's it. That's fairly straightforward to extract as well. And then the same thing is artifact inventory. Which workspaces do I have? Who has access to that workspace? Which reports do I have? All those types of things. I'm calling it an artifact inventory because it's just an easy name to get what's inside of Power BI. And then one that I had a bit more issues with as well was, okay, how do I get a hold of where those local PBIX files are? Luckily, they have a best practice that says it needs to be in a folder, in that folder, and then that folder has subfolders based on workspaces, and people put it there as well. But it had to be put in the exact same place for it to be picked up on the on the checks as well, because if they were building a report that says my pretty report v1 v2 v3, and it is published to my pretty report in the service, then it's not going to be picked up. So there were some technical things I had to figure out. And then the same thing as well is user licenses. Who's got pro
Mm-hmm.
licenses? Who's got free licenses? Get that information as well. One of the things that I would love to have done at that point as well was look into the Graph API, the Microsoft Graph API, to get out groups and memberships and those types of things. But yeah, I wasn't able to fit that in. And then the entire data flowed through with SSIS because that was a tool they were using at that point for their ETL. Load that data into the ODS, make sure that it is loaded into the reporting friendly format as well with SQL views, and then start building things inside of Power BI Desktop. That's essentially a high level overview of what this architecture is like. And architecture is a big word, but it gives you an idea of the flow that I'm using for this one. And then to give you the breakdown of how it's actually happening is all those PowerShell scripts, they authenticate through a service principal
Mm-hmm.
with an app registration for everything for artifact inventory, activity log, and licenses. That's all done through service principal. It means that we had to cut back on some of the other things that we wanted to try. For instance, one of the things was the about page that I mentioned. That one was a check as well. We had to abandon that one because getting the report pages information cannot be done through the service principal. And we bumped into those technical things that we had great ideas for, that we had to abandon because otherwise we'd run out of time trying to fix those things.
So Benny, we'll need
Yeah.
to fix the headset one more time. Oh, it went back to Mr. Robot.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, actually, yeah, it actually just fixed itself even
Yeah.
before you turned it off. Oh, here we go.
No,
You're
you
you're
were
good.
just in time.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Good. So one of the things as well that we were trying to check, for instance, was how many report pages do they have in a single report? Because if it's a report with like 99 tabs inside of a report, that's not necessarily going to be easy to use inside of Power BI. And then yeah, to quote Jeff Weir, sorting those tabs is also not going to be the easiest thing that you've done in your lifetime as well. If you got 99 tabs in Power BI Desktop, and then we were only using read-only admin APIs. So those admin APIs, because they work with service principal, and that's the thing we were going through forward. Schedule those PowerShell scripts, output those files, and then make sure that we have all the data for user licenses, just which group is being used, activities, artifacts, all that different types of information. Like I said, SSIS, land the data, and then dirty SQL. That's the thing. I mean, like I said, quick and dirty.
Yep.
It was looking at the data that was in there and then just start determining things that we needed for our checks. So for every one of the checks, it was essentially a SQL script that was importing data into a fact table. For instance, this one is going to check, is it running in an import mode, a live connection mode? Is it running direct query mode? And that's what it's actually looking at this point. The thing that I did run into later was that with hybrid tables, for instance, this check isn't valid anymore. But yeah, I'm gone, so that's for my successor to fix this. But yeah, that's also the nature of this entire thing, the nature of everything we're doing with Power BI. It evolves at such a rapid pace that things like these are going to have to be reworked at some point anyway. But they output that data, and then we go into a Power BI model. The names are in Dutch, but the majority should be fairly usable for you as well. It means that we have two fact tables where we have checks, we have an activity log. And that means that we have those checks that I've been executing and then the activities that have been done as well. And then it's all about reports, workspaces, a data set, a dashboard, a date table, all those things. That's what it boils down to. So not an overly complicated model. And yes, bidirectional models because I had to go fast. I wasn't in the mood to write DAX for this. But the model isn't super complex to say. Yeah, I know, Reed. I went. There were other shortcuts that I had to take as well to get this to land.
Yep.
And then it's essentially a Power BI report. And this report, we'll get to it afterwards, is an overview page. Just give me the big overview. with the key metrics that I need to look at. That's it. Give me that overview. What am I looking at? Then per check, get a page that tells me what are the metrics, what's the trend graph, give me a list of details, why is it succeeding or failing in the check, and then linking it to the documentation page. Okay, and then also naturally the about page, because that had to be included as well. So going into the actual report, read, don't kill me for this one. I didn't choose the coloring scheme. It's
I'll just
I'm not a
silently
fan of a
judge from
template.
the back. Yeah, over
Yeah,
here.
yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. So I can't show you the interactive report because of there's potential information in there that's not necessarily going to be
Megan Longoria is
useful.
calling right now about accessibility.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's I had the same conversation at that point about the coloring schemes. But yeah, it's we had to move forward at a rapid pace. But essentially, what it boils down to is we're looking at the checks. How many of these checks are working? How many of these checks are not working? And then we had this like gray zone where it's not failing, it's not working. We're not completely sure about what this is. It's like sort of an exception, but we'll get back to this at a later point. Just to get you some key metrics. And then it's all about what's the trend, where you have the bars that explain to you how many reports do you actually have. So how many reports are being added into the tenant. Roughly put, you're going from 300 reports to, let's say, 550 reports in a time span of March to October, which is a fairly good growth for them. And the thing is that the checks were also going up, which means that they were actively being followed when they were making their reports. It means that the conversations they were having were actually working. And again, it's mostly Dutch, but to give you an idea, it's about reusing data sets where the reusability and the number of shared data sets that were actively being used actually went up because people realized that, hey, this is actually a better way of working, a better way of working with this. Or to highlight another one, um, for instance, where, okay, what are the inactive artifacts? Do you still need to have these inactive artifacts? Do we need to delete them? Do we need to change them? Decrease the refresh schedule? Those types of things. So Cockpit to help them just make their decisions. And then, like I said, people still want their tables. So that means that they also had some magic buttons on the right bottom side that allowed them to switch to just the table view where they could actually see, okay, what is this? How many checks are we doing? How many are failing? Just to have them get that type of overview as well. And then we go into a page per check. It's very similar for all of the different pages where they actually just have the same types of metrics. They sometimes differ for the check that they're actually looking at. The same graph that gives them the trend. I made a change later as well that gives them some sort of more KPI state to see if the actual reusage of the data sets, for instance, was going up or down, to make it a bit more visually intuitive. But that was fixes that were made after that point as well. And then the grayed out box is essentially, okay, this is all the details. What's the report? What's the data set? Who scheduled? Who's the owner of the data set? Is it failing? Is it not succeeding? So that they just could have those details. And then, as I mentioned, the explanation. When is it failing? When is it succeeding as a check? Okay. And then the same thing for a number of those other reports as well, just to make sure that they can have those different conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback that I got a few weeks after is that they were essentially having those conversations with the functional business owners, and the trends were going up. I mean, you're starting to see it moderately in this one as well, this specific check. It's the number of reports were growing, the checks were increasing as well. So that means that they were consistently doing well in the conversations they were having. And before I had my final day with them, we determined next steps. I mean, where are we taking this? And obviously, the first step was try to get this thing operationalized to make sure that it's a bit more robust, that it works, and that that it will continue working as well in the future when there is new stuff added as well. The second thing was like add a whitelist or an exception list, because there were certain workspaces where IT did certain operational checks, for instance, where they did connect with data query to a database that's not the appropriate database, for instance. That shouldn't show up in these checks. I mean, now you can obviously just hide that workspace or hide that data set, but they
Hmm.
shouldn't be checked in the first place because they're never going to be bothered about that check as well, because it's one of those IT governed workspace. And then yeah, like like any good data analytics team, they make the most sins towards the guidelines that have been put in place. They do experiments. They put stuff into a workspace. Don't use it anymore because it's an experiment. So that's one of the workspaces that had to be was a candidate for whitelisting as well, to make sure that yeah, it doesn't pollute any of the checks that are being done. And then, yeah, at this point, we only had the user access overview, which means that we only got the information for a workspace. Are they people an admin? Are they a member? Are they a viewer? Are they a contributor? That's the only thing we got at this point, because at that time, the get access for the different get report user access, get dashboard user access, those APIs didn't exist yet. Scanner API did start including them, and now you have those new APIs that have this as well. So that's one of the things we thought about as well, that we can get the full cockpit overview of who's actually been added manually on a report,
Mm,
who's
okay.
only added, who has access through this report because they've been shared with manually because someone hit the share button, or the feature you have with everyone with this link can view the report that's been added as well a while back, to get that overview of those types of permissions, because the workspace is one thing and they wanted to streamline as much of the user access through workspaces, but it, for an end user, it also has to be doable. I mean, if they have to go ask permission to, hey, can you please add person XYZ to this group because they have to have access to there, or if that shiny share button is practically staring them in the eye and poking them, then they're going to use that. I mean, they want to get their job done as well, and it's just about getting that overview of who's using it, who's actually doing it with them. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, getting the best practice analyzer, automate that stuff.
Hmm.
Maybe
Hmm.
even look into all the log analytics things because that gives you a ton of information as well. That's the things that we were going to look into. And then, yeah, well, like I said, whatever other insights may pop up, because over time we're going to draft new guidelines. We're going to have new insights. Maybe the existing guidelines get reviewed and they don't make that much sense anymore. Yeah, things change. That's it. And then for a brief moment, we had an idea on open sourcing it, but I pulled out of that one because, yeah, I mean, it's governing open source is essentially a second day job. I'll be honest about this, and it was not something that I was up for because I'm like that one as well. If I open source those scripts, I want those scripts to be robust. I want them to work. They have to scale to incredibly large tenants as well, because now we're talking about 1,000 people. But if I give them to very big companies where they've got 60,000 people on the tenant, that also needs to work there. And
Hmm.
then what if an API changes tomorrow? If a limit changes, that breaks something, people are relying on it. Yeah, that's not something that I wanted to take with me. But that's my personal choice, and I applaud people like Daniel Ortikir with Tabular Editor, like Darren Gospel for Deck Studio. I applaud them for doing this. And I mean, I'm really grateful that they are doing these things because it helps my situation a lot as well, because I use their tools and they help me, period. But it's not a responsibility that I wanted to bear in my consulting days, and definitely don't want to do that now because I've got other things I can invest my time into as well. And then to wrap up,
Exactly.
to get to the end point is it was an experiment. I mean, this was, let's see if it pays off. Let's see what this does. Let's see if we actually get something done with this. And it went right. The experiment actually paid off, And yeah, I mean, they got good results of this, and they wanted to move forward with this one as well. And they, as I mentioned in the beginning, they're all about data culture, and it actually pays off. It's hard work getting it set up. It's hard work making sure that this is working well within the organization, but they are doing it so well. And it is, I mean, the pure fact that they said, here, external consultant, just have 5 days and build us something that we can use in those conversations is for me the ultimate testament of their vision into this thing. And this is just specifically for the reporting part. They've got other initiatives running as well. And yeah, I'll be honest, Microsoft documentation had some gaps to fill. They were, I submitted some feedback at the time. Those were fills. New APIs have been added. I mean, so things that weren't possible 6 months ago are possible now because of those new APIs are being added. And that's what I really think is so cool about this product. It's constantly evolving. That's what I hate about the product, that it's constantly evolving as well. But every week you've got
Yeah.
shiny new tools to play with. Yeah.
There's
And
kind of
then
like
yeah,
a back and forth. At least I know, like, and you're obviously aware in the
yeah,
MVP community where it's like, oh, this is a cool new feature, but there's also like five other things that we wish you would either
yeah,
A, fix or B, improve before adding. It's like
yeah,
I don't want a new toy yet. I want this toy that I have to be better. But it's a
yeah,
part-time job keeping up to date onto that, you know?
yeah,
It's both exciting, but at this same time, sometimes stressful. Like, oh, okay, I gotta go. Like this new thing just rolled out. It's gonna be really important for customers. I need to go spend
yeah,
like 3 hours, getting expert
yeah.
enough on it that I can sound knowledgeable to the people that I'm communicating to this about.
Yeah, or you talk with a customer and they say, yeah, we're trying out this feature. What feature? And then
Oh
you
yeah,
Google it or you Bing it, and then, oh yeah, that feature. Yeah, okay, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yep, yep.
Yep, yep. Yeah, that happened to me on several occasions. I mean, I'll be honest about it.
I mean, I
Yeah,
actually tell
I
my
mean,
clients when I can learn something new where I'm taught by a client or a training something that I actually learned from. Like that's one of my favorite days. Like, oh, cool. Like for once, I get to be in the
yeah,
other role. You just taught me something I didn't realize. That's really cool. So like I've now added that to
yeah,
my belt.
absolutely. I mean, that's essentially, as a consultant, you're always growing as well. You're still learning things, and that's what I love. That's what I loved about the job. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the perks of the job, to be honest.
Agreed. Yeah. Continue. It's a CICD, but for our brains.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Full version control for our brains. Yeah, let's
Exactly.
go with that one. Yeah,
Continuous improvement. This is fantastic,
yeah,
though. I really appreciate how you frame this in more of a narrative and a story, not just like, here's a tool, let me click around, here's the features. Like, no, it's like, what was the needs? What was the business need that serviced the journey to begin with? The fact that you were given the time to build it, uh, you know, the
yeah,
honesty of like, like it works, but again, like there are certain workarounds given my time constraint. I had 5 days to get this deployed and production ready. So,
yeah,
here's what I built out to do that. And I think it's a really useful tool as well.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, and it's one of the things that I, let's say, regret that I can't keep building on this one. Although I've yeah, I mean, I've got this to-do list, and somewhere on that to-do list is build this out on one of the MVP tenants to make sure that I can build on this, improve this. But yeah, let's be real. The odds of it going down that list is very, very real. Yeah, but I
You
did
can
have,
always have put more time towards it, but you said like it's the laundry list of things that here's my passion
yeah,
projects. I got like 20 things on this list, and I have like maybe a couple hours a week to spend on these. So,
yeah. The thing is, I have lots of passion projects. I
hmm
think many things are interesting, which constantly leads me to the fact that it's hard to get things done. But I did have some conversations with Rui as well, because Rui is effectively capturing all that data already in his Power BI monitor solutions.
hmm
To see if I can piggyback on this one in some way. But like I said, I don't see it happening in the coming months because there's other stuff happening.
He's a mad lad coder when it comes to like he knows so many languages, and he has the ability to like write scripts for so many things. I Yeah,
Rui
every
is a
time
full-on dev. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And it's impressive some of the stuff that he
yeah,
does. I know multiple
Yeah.
MVPs at some point are like, I have an idea. I need a dev though. Hey Rui, you got like a couple hours to like help take this idea and script
Yeah.
it so we can figure out a solution for this. Like I know Matt Allington back before
Yeah.
auto scaling happened, he had a way to like
Yeah.
schedule that blog post that allowed you to use Power Automate
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
turn
Yeah.
on and off
Yeah. That's the one. Yeah.
your Power BI capacity if you had like business hours, you could from 9 to 5 and then scale it down.
Yeah.
So it was like
Mhm.
the V1 of at least incremental scaling that you could do for your
Yeah.
company. But I really helped with that way back in the day.
But yeah, a simple example is I didn't build any throttling limits into the script because I wasn't
Mm,
hitting them, so I didn't bother with it. The second I rolled out those PowerShell scripts to a large tenant, it wouldn't work. And that's one of the things that Ruiz got nailed down completely in his passion project. Yeah, and that's the difference between having someone with proper coding skills versus a simpleton that's trying to write some PowerShell. That's yeah, that's the difference.
I mean, if I was to still have a resume, I would have a bullet of a lot of code languages. But then it's like, well, how well do you know that? I know just enough to have accomplished every need that I've had for those on various projects. How much Powershell do you know? Just enough to do some automation in Power BI, same with VBA. I
Yep,
learned just enough
pretty
to
much.
do customer requirements whenever they wanted, like an email to automatically open and send to like a list of people and
Yeah.
yada yada. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, this has been great, and I think it's been insightful to see kind of some of the processes that goes on to developing these tools uh, for
Mhm.
customers and external facing users that are developed by people internally at Microsoft for sure. So I always enjoy when people like you, well now and then like Will Thompson or others, when you get to hear just a bit on the journey and then also just the gears that turn within the machine and things that need to happen for change or for
Yeah.
certain things just to develop
Yeah.
within Microsoft.
Mhm. Could we tackle one of the comments that Kevin Arnold made? It's an
Uh,
interesting statement that I want to jump on as well.
yeah,
It
that's
seems like Power BI tools, that one.
Kevin. I'm actually trying. Was it a recent
It's
one?
uh,
Oh,
it
there it
was a
is.
recent
Yes,
one. It's
yes,
the
got it.
third. Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
see the queue.
yeah.
I
That's the
always look for
one.
the queues, so there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah. That's the one. Yeah. I mean, yes, Power BI tools. It's been they went live with it, I think, in October, November ish. Um, and it
Mm-hmm.
does a great thing. The thing is that I'll drop the desktop hardening big buzzword in there.
Yeah,
As long as that's not nailed down, I'm not doing anything that's got to do with getting information about visuals, those kind of things, because it's bound to break at some point. And they can extract it. I acknowledge that, but yeah, I wanna have something that is going to keep me that I don't have to constantly look back at is it still working because something has changed. And I know Matthias and the other person I forgot his name are working hard to get this tool and to make sure it's updated. But yeah, like I said, I don't want to constantly keep those things updated because something is changing. And with Power
your
BI, it's very
your headset.
yeah. Yeah, let's just
uh,
keep going for this.
Yeah, so well, I mean, I would say, why don't you reset your headset, and I'll actually, I have a little mention that I wanted to do on Power BI tools. So,
Yeah, I'll
uh,
reset it.
yeah, did a I did a stream on that, a couple weeks ago for those who saw it, and Matthias, for Power BI tools will be coming back, and I just saw a message from him on Slack before the stream, and we'll be doing a tutorial series that's kind of a more in-depth walkthrough of end-to-end step process to like actually set up and deploy to both Azure and to GitHub. So there will be some additional content that people have been wanting on that tool set, but it's a fantastic tool. And then Benny looks like we'll be back on in just a second here, so I'll give him just a minute to tune on. Let's see, and snap our
There we go.
fingers. There we go. All right, we're back on.
Love it.
Yes, excellent.
So yeah, I completely missed what you were saying, Reed. But
He'll be Matthias will be back on for Power BI tools, and it's we're gonna do a
excellent.
more
Yeah,
thorough tutorial because that was the number one request from most people is can I actually get a step by step. Here's how I can set up and deploy to either Azure or Azure DevOps or
yeah,
to GitHub, and we'll
yeah,
tentatively confirm recording that in
yeah.
the near future.
Yeah, great. That's great. That's great. I mean, yeah, they're doing wonderful things. But yeah, it's I I l- I love external tools and the direction they're taking. That's stuff I
Hmm.
like seeing. I mean, the entire journey that we saw with Tabular Editor, DAX Studio as well. I mean, I hope that Power BI tools can turn into something like this as well. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes into in the future.
Exactly. And I've been in just further, I'm assuming further integration, and those tools are rapidly developing. Like, hey, we're
Mhm.
1 year into Tabular Editor 3 being paid, so like, that it's probably only scratching the surface of what it can do, especially with the DAX debugger that came out. Oh, that was
Yeah,
like 10 that was
yeah,
like 10 Christmases in one. That was a
yeah.
decade of
That
Christmases
was
when that came out.
I like, loved that one. I couldn't stop playing with it. Really.
It,
Yeah,
also,
absolutely.
a preview hint for that is I talked to Daniel as well, and because I want kind of like a dedicated tutorial video of just kind of walking through that. So we're gonna
Hmm.
record one of those, and in the next month or so, release a video that gives a person kind
That's
of a
great.
thorough
Yeah.
walkthrough of specifically using that feature because it's so paramount, I think, for people to learning DAX. I'm going to be using it in my like trainings when I give it to clients now. Is we're going to open DAX debugger. Here's something that's broken. Here's how we find out how to fix it with that.
Yeah. So I also I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but we have an immigrated Canadian in Belgium called Kurt Bueller, and he is doing a fantastic series on Tabular Editor as well. He's
Oh,
going
lovely.
step by step into the entire Tabular Editor 3 and explaining everything in blog posts. And he's doing fantastic work on this one as well. Yeah.
You, if at some point, like after this, maybe send me his contact info because I'm always looking for people to come onto
Uh,
this, and if he has a good
yeah.
perspective and a walkthrough of the current build of
If
TE3,
you're having him
yeah,
on, Reed,
yeah,
get him on data storytelling or data literacy. That's what you want
okay.
to get him on for. The guy is he's insane on what he's doing. He's really
Yeah,
cool. But
well,
yeah,
yeah, we'll
let's
talk
chat
about
when
that
we're done
offline.
with this.
That,
And yeah,
yeah, I always love
yeah,
getting new people on, so perfect. Uh,
yeah.
I'll just mention to the chat group any other questions that I can throw to Benny before we log off. We'll start wrapping up here, but I'll look over in a few seconds to see if there's any remaining questions. But yeah, otherwise this has been really fantastic. Again, I'm
Yeah,
happy for your
absolutely.
career transition over to Microsoft. You're only a few months into it, so I'm sure you're going to continue to have more stories and interesting growth opportunities within the organization. But I've been impressed with the quality of people that they've brought on, including you, in the last 12 months. Like the joke that
Yeah,
we have on our Slack channel is like who's next on the list that's going to be snatched up from the MVP
I
community.
know. I
Yeah.
know who's next.
Oh, there you
But
go.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, the Adams team, they had a new hire as well
Hmm.
today, Zoe Douglas, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know her as well and see what she can do because I've seen the content that she's put out on LinkedIn as well, and it's some really good content that she's been putting out. The same thing with yeah other people that have recently been joining. Dan English, for instance. Yeah, it's really cool to see.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think it just shows how much the Power Platform and all of that stuff in general is just growing because they need to be able to service a lot more of these enterprise customers and make sure that you have a
Yeah,
good ear to the customers to know like what's needed in these tools to make sure that they can stay competitive and at the bleeding edge.
yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I don't think I see anything else then. So otherwise, we can wrap up. This has been fantastic,
Yep.
and I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. I'm sure we'll have you back on again at some point as well. And I will
Yep.
be seeing
Definitely.
you. If you want to can you give a quick plug on the conference that you're helping host, and I can drop the link in the description too.
Yeah. So the conference that I'm helping organizing is Data Minds Connect, and that's essentially a 2-day conference in Belgium on October 10th and 11th. It is a Microsoft data and AI platform, and that means that we span the entire landscape. But we also have dedicated space available for Power BI, and that's essentially our most popular track as well. And we always go for learn stuff, have fun, and drink a beer if you want to, because it is Belgium, still a country. Yeah,
My plan is to be there. It's also on my birthday, October 11th, so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
a good excuse
yeah,
to hang out and have a good Belgian
yeah,
beer. Yeah,
yeah. An infamous speaker dinner, so that can be arranged if you're coming over. Yeah.
excellent, perfect. All right, Benny, have a
All
great
right.
night, and everyone else, I will see you
Thank
on my
you.
stream on Friday. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships as well. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on social media to help pass on this awesome content and to help the channel grow. So until next time.